Once again, we are back to look at 538's tool for tracking ELO rating for NBA teams during the 2016-2017 season. My earlier video went over the teams in the Eastern Conference. In this video, we'll be going over the same for teams in the Western Conference. The Mavs' early season schedule had a lot of road games, and that contributed to their rating dropping down to the 1400s. But they never go below 1400 and are able to get back up to the average before dropping back down to 1400 to end the season. The only major trade they made was trading for Nerlens Noel during the All-Star break, which is around the middle of February. And one thing to explain the incline during the midpoint of the season, one thing I noticed was Seth Curry, he became a starting point guard around January 12th, which coincided with their rating going back up to 1500. The Nuggets started with a below average rating and look to continue this trend similar to the past season. However, around mid-January, Nikola Jokic came back into the starting rotation at the center position, started playing really well, and that brought their rating back above 1500. And they ended the season with a solid rating at 1552. The Nuggets barely missed the playoffs this year, but look to be a solid team. They are definitely a team to pay attention to next season and should be in a strong contention to make the playoffs as they start building around Jokic. The Golden State Warriors had the highest ELO rating during the 2016-17 season at 1803 and finished with the highest ELO rating at 1770. Throughout most of the season, they stayed above 1700. They experienced a bit of a drop at the time of the Durant injury, but picked it back up by the end of the season. At the moment, they are very close to 1800 after sweeping the Blazers in the first round, and there is a good chance they have an easier road to the finals than last year, which should result in a very high ELO rating at above 1800. That may be comparable to their historical best at 1839 from last year. Looking purely at ELO, the Warriors were the best team this season, which makes them a strong favorite to win the championship. The Rockets started slightly above 1500, but their rating steadily climbed at the beginning of the season, where they peaked at 1676 before stabilizing at 1600 for the rest of the season. Their rating is similar to the one from 2 seasons ago where they made the conference finals, and it looks like they have a good chance to reach the conference finals again this season. The Clippers started at around 1600 and even got to 1700 early in the season. But Blake Griffin got injured in the middle of December until mid-January, which may account for the drop in their rating. Chris Paul was also injured shortly after Blake came back, where they continued to hover around 1550 and then had a strong end to their season and finished with the solid rating at 1636. The Clippers core does not look to be as good this season when compared to the past 2 seasons, and their playoff hopes look grim with Blake being out for the rest of the season. My hometown team, the Los Angeles Lakers, had a strong start to the season, but it's been downhill since December. They had a strong showing at the end, but the end of the season rating measurements are not as indicative as the rest of the season, since this is the time when most teams are tanking and throwing games by resting guys. In fact, it would have been better if they lost those games at the end to improve their lottery chances and keep their pick. Let's move on. The Grizzlies started below 1500 to start the season due to their poor performance last year, but their rating steadily climbed and peaked at 1598 and then ended up at 1482. They dropped 73 points over 3 games due to big losses at home to the Nets, the Clippers, and the Hawks. The ELO rating system heavily punishes teams who lose at home and also lose by a wide margin. And that would explain why they had such a big drop over these 3 games, since all were home games and it wasn't very close. Despite having good players at point guard and center with Mike Conley and Marc Gasol, they really couldn't figure out a consistent starting lineup during the season, which may have contributed them to not being able to finish off with a strong rating. The Wolves stayed around 1450 most of the season, but got a big boost in their rating with a blowout win against Utah that raised their rating by 40 points. They then peaked at 1539 and then ended the season at 1463. They lost Zach LaVine for the rest of the season on February, but their rating did not suffer. They definitely improved from last season and may be able to continue improving next season. The Pelicans hovered around 1400 most of the season, but after the All-Star break, where they traded for DeMarcus Cousins, climbed up to 1500 before tanking late in the season. Looking at this alone would suggest that adding DeMarcus Cousins was beneficial to the team, but it is still yet to be seen if it will work out next season, since end of the season ratings are not as indicative due to, like we mentioned earlier, teams tanking and resting players at the end of the season. The Thunder started out with a high rating at 1685, but with Durant's move, it was expected their rating would drop, which explains the downward trend throughout the season. They, however, still finished with a good rating above 1500. The Suns were one of the worst teams according to the ELO rating measurement, and could have finished with the worst ELO rating for the season if not for a 21-point win against OKC late in the season. It looks like the Blazers declined this season compared to last season, but after trading for Yusuf Nurkic, their rating climbed up to the high 1500s and finished at 1563. Like the Nuggets, they have potential to be a team in strong contention for the playoffs come next season. The Kings with DeMarcus hovered around 1450 for most of the season and then dropped to 1400 after the trade. There wasn't much improvement in the rating when compared to last year, which may have pushed the Kings to trade away DeMarcus Cousins. The Spurs were consistently around a very high rating at 1700. This was the first season post Tim Duncan's retirement, so it was expected that their rating would drop from last season. But last season's team was really good and actually exhibited the highest ELO rating in Spurs history. And to be able to maintain their ELO rating at 1700 this season, after losing a significant player in Tim Duncan, is really impressive, which makes a strong case for Kawhi Leonard for MVP. Only the Golden State Warriors sport a better rating than the Spurs this season. The Rockets with Harden and the Thunder with Westbrook never even hit 1700 during the course of the season. The Jazz also stayed consistent at a good rating around 1600, and it's definitely one of the stronger teams in the West. They've improved from last season, and it looks like they have potential to be a title contending team next season if they continue to improve. Adding another All-Star player could definitely speed that up. So that concludes my review of the 2016-2017 NBA season using 538's ELO rating system. Really awesome that 538 is continually updating the data powering this tool, and I look forward to revisiting the tool after the playoffs and in future NBA seasons. The ELO rating system was really interesting to look at in detail, and I think it helps identify teams that may be better than what their actual record may suggest. This season, the Nuggets, the Blazers, the Heat, and the Nets stuck out to me the most due to how high their ELO rating climbed to when they found their optimum lineup. I also realized that the ELO rating system is the strongest towards the middle of the season and a short while post All-Star break. There's some things in the beginning of the season and the end of the season that distort the rating system. Some teams start out with a rating that is not really accurate due to player movement during the offseason. For example, the Thunder had a really high rating to start with, not taking into account the fact that they lost Kevin Durant over the offseason, which affects the calculation of the rating against teams they play against early in the season. Also, towards the end of the season, teams start tanking or resting players for the playoffs, so some upset wins are not truly upset wins. So that distorts the calculations at the end of the season, where you'll see some teams have really big spikes. It would have been interesting to see how the ratings play out if all the teams started at the same point at 1500. I would have also liked to have been able to compare teams against one another. This tool, you're only able to see one team at a time. Only when you zoom out is when it shows all the other teams, but it's hard to really get much out of that. One minor feature I would like to see with the tool is indicating if the game was a home or away game. Since being a home or away game has an effect on the rating, It would be useful if that information was provided in the tooltip. For example, in this case, Thunder played against Portland. If it was a home game, leave as is. If it was an away game, have the @ sign right before Portland. I look forward to continuing to use this tool and gaining a better understanding of reading the ELO rating system in upcoming seasons, and will definitely be producing more videos on my thoughts.